Hi, my name is Mackenzie Van Meek. I made IVL7 with Max Bueller. In this video, he talks about the digestive system and the pathway of digested food, as well as the respiratory system and the pathway of airflow. I talk about the chambers of the heart and the blood flow through those chambers, as well as the sheep brain and the functions of those structures. I hope you enjoy.
In this video, we're going to be talking about the chambers of the heart and the pathway of the blood flow. We're just going to start by pointing out the structures of the chambers of the heart. Here is the right atrium, and here's the right ventricle, and the left atrium, and the left ventricle. So moving on to the blood flow, deox blood will come into the right atrium by two veins, the inferior and superior vena cava. As the atrium contracts, the blood flows into the right ventricle through the tricuspid valve, which is inside the heart. Once the ventricle is full, the valves will close, so there's no backflow of blood. Then lastly, the ventricle contracts the deoxy blood, which leaves the heart through the pulmonic valve, through the pulmonary artery, and then this will go to the lungs to get oxygenated and will return by the pulmonary veins. On the left side of the heart, you will have the pulmonary veins bringing the oxygenated blood back to the left atrium. Using those pulmonary veins from the lungs, the atrium contracts, pushing blood through the mitral valve and into the left ventricle of the heart. It then closes just as the tricuspid valve did to prevent the backflow of the oxygenated blood. Once the ventricle contracts and it's full, it leaves the heart through the aortic valve to the aorta and out to the rest of the body to be used up.
So starting off here is the digestive system, and the cavity associated with the digestive system would be our peritoneal cavity. Some linings that are associated with this digestive system is the visceral peritoneum, which will be the lining of the different organs, and the parietal peritoneum, which lines the cavity of the digestive system. So starting off in here, you can see that the esophagus right here leads into the stomach, which is this right here. After food is processed in the stomach, it leads into the small intestine, which is known as the jejunum and the ileum. Part of the ileum, although, goes into the large intestine, which would be found right here, leading to the rectum and finally coming out of the anus. Some additional structures found in the digestive system would be the pancreas, which would be right here. Although we believe that after due to washing the organism multiple times, some of the pancreas was flushed out, but we can assume that the pancreas was right here because the spleen is right here with some excess tissue coming over it. Another structure that was unable to be found in this organism was the gallbladder, and the gallbladder would be found in this right here, in between the liver and the stomach. Starting in the head region, we'll look at the first two glands, which would be the mandibular gland, which would be in this region, and the parotid gland, which would be right in this region here. And as we open the mouth, we would be able to see the tongue, the oral cavity. This right here is going to be the entrance to our nasopharynx. As we look deeper, we can see that the glottis as well as the larynx would be right here, larynx being further in there, and underneath that would be the epiglottis. So now discussing the functions of each structure in the digestive system. Here, going back to the mandibular gland, that is responsible for producing pheromones, while the parotid gland right here is responsible for producing saliva, for secreting mucus and secreting food. And once again, into the oral cavity, the tongue will be known for as breaking down foods so that it's easier for it to go down to the esophagus. The nasopharynx is a passageway that goes from the nose to the trachea, allowing the organism to breathe through its nose and having airflow that way. The glottis right here controls airflow, while the epiglottis is a little flap right in there that prevents food from going down the windpipe of the animal and going back into the glottis. You won't be able to see it, but in there will be the larynx, which is known as many things. One being the voice box, allowing the organism to speak, and allowing to a tube that allows airflow, as I said with the nasopharynx. And going into the peritoneal cavity, we have the esophagus once more going into the stomach, allowing food from traveling from the mouth all the way to the stomach. And as it arrives in the stomach, it is broken down by stomach acid, excuse me. After food being broken down into the stomach and being used as energy, it is further broken down into the small intestine and once more into the large intestine. And once it reaches the large intestine, that is when waste is taken from the rectum and out the anus. And those additional organs, such as the liver, is known for producing bile. And actually with the liver, you can see that in here there would be ligament, which is known as falciform ligament, and that is responsible for holding liver together. The gallbladder, again, stated that it was lost. That will be responsible for storing that bile produced by the liver. The spleen filters blood so that no toxic waste is found in the blood. The pancreas, which would be located in here, that regulates blood sugar. And the rectum, once more, is for passageway of waste. So now I will be discussing the respiratory system. And starting off in the head region once more, we can see that right here, this tube with the different segments will be the trachea, where airway is taken from the mouth and into the lungs. And going into the pleural cavity, where the lungs are located, we can see once again visceral and parietal pleural, which is going to be the lining of the cavity, which is going to be our parietal, and then the visceral pleura, which lines the organs. Going into the cavity once more, we can see the left, the right lung. And then if we take a look in here we would see the different bronchi, which attaches the trachea to the lung, which is responsible for input and the output of oxygen flowing through the lung. So starting off with the function of the respiratory system, we have here the trachea, once more bringing air from the mouth to the lungs. If we take a look at the lungs right here, the left and the right, the lungs are responsible for oxygenating blood that comes from the pulmonary artery. And once that oxy blood is oxygenated, it goes back to the heart through pulmonary veins.
In this video, we are going to be talking about the mammal brain, in particular the sheep brain. We're going to start off by talking about the forebrain. The primary division of this is going to be the prosocephalon, and the subdivisions is the telecephalon and the diensocephalon within the embryonic stages. Within the adult structures, though, of the telecephalon is the olfactory bulbs, That's going to be located here and here. You can get it up close. Here and here. As well as the cerebral hemispheres, which are here and here. The function of these olfactory bulbs is where the olfactory tracts lead to that pick up scents, and it's processed in these lobes. As for the cerebral hemisphere, this is where the cerebrum is located, and the function of the cerebrum is for critical thinking, so things like controlling speech, thought, emotions, reading, writing, and learning. It's all going to happen here. And then as for the diencephalon's adult structures, those include the optic nerves, which are located here and here, as well as all the thalamuses, like the thalamus itself, the hypothalamus, the epithalamus, and the pineal glands, and we'll talk about those in a minute. But as for the optic nerves, they are responsible for transmitting sensory information for vision from the eye to the brain. And then for the thalamus, we're going to enter the brain here. The thalamus, we're going to do the other half. There we go. So thalamus is located right here. Its function allows for sensory information to pass through, except for the olfactory, because that would be backtracking. These sensory informations include vision, sight, taste, and hearing. Then there's the pineal body, which is right here. This includes the epithalamus, and its job is for light sensitive organ, which helps tell the animal when it should be awake or when it should be sleeping. Lastly here, we got the hypothalamus, which is located underneath the thalamus, so right in here. And that job is to control a couple things, which includes basic drives like hunger, sex, thirst, as well as temperature regulation. It controls the ANS and is the sleep and dream center. Next, we're going to have the midbrain. So this is going to include the mesocephalon. The subdivision remains the mesocephalon in embryo life, and the adult structures of the mammals is the corpora quadrigemini. Sorry, that's hard to pronounce. But it's right in here, if you can see, right there. So actually a fun thing that kind of goes along with the name is if you keep them side by side and open them up, you can see all four, which is related to the quad there. But its function is that it's the reflex center involving vision and hearing, and it is also involved in preliminary vision processing and the control of eye movements. So that's going to be right in there. Awesome. And lastly is the hindbrain. The embryonic divisions include the rhombencephalon, and the subdivisions are the metencephalon and the myelencephalon. The adult structures of the metacephalon include the cerebellum. We open up here. This is going to be your cerebellum. Its function is responsible for the muscle coordination and balance. Also within the metacephalon is the pons, which is located right here. And its function is it acts as a bridge, helping with sleep, arousal, dreams, and facial expressions. Next is the adult structure of the myelencephalon, including the medulla oblongata, which is right here above the pons. Its function is to include heart rate, breathing, sneezing, coughing, aggression, and protective reflexes. So this is the brain.